In 1994, the world of Street Fighter left the video game format and exploded onto the big screen in a feature film. The movie focuses on Colonel Guile, played by Jean-Claude Van Damme, who is out to stop the evil General M. Bison, played with delightful menace by Raul Julia, in the fictional Southeastern Asian nation of Shadaloo. Although intended for a market of young kids, the Street Fighter movie got a lot of flack upon its release by critics, who really didn't seem to like it. However, over the years, it has developed a cult following, and many who grew up with it claim that it is a great movie, and was a wonderful part of their childhoods. So was the Street Fighter movie judged too harshly by older, boring film critics covered in dusty cobwebs who just didn't understand the Street Fighter brand, or was this movie a dud that just lacked the Street Fighter magic?
Well, I don't know, but we're going to try and find out why this movie wasn't met with a bang, but with a whimper, by looking into 10 things that you didn't know about the Street Fighter movie. Let's check it out. Just a side note, although I'm a fan of Street Fighter, I'm not entirely a Street Fighter purist, so there are going to be some names that I struggle with, so if I get any of the names wrong, please don't threaten to kill me in the comments section. Yeah, that's actually happened.
Number 10. The creation of Street Fighter. As we all know, the Street Fighter movie is based on the fighting arcade games released by Capcom. Really, Street Fighter came to be because of the 1972 Bruce Lee movie, Game of Death. It all started when video game designer Takashi Nishiyama was working on a beat-em-up arcade game called Kung Fu Master, which, as mentioned, he was influenced by Game of Death. But hang on, what has Kung Fu Master got to do with Street Fighter, and thus Game of Death? Well, I'm getting to that. Released in 1984, Kung Fu Master was a game that had a huge focus on its boss fights. After working on Kung Fu Master, Nishiyama took inspiration from the boss battles in Kung Fu Master to create a game purely made out of boss battles, if you will, and thus Street Fighter was invented. It is also said that the game takes influence from fellow games. Now I'm gonna really struggle to say this, so just bear with me, and once again, please don't kill me if it's wrong. YIER Kung Fu and Karate Champ. The backstory of Street Fighter also took inspiration from another Bruce Lee movie, Enter the Dragon, in the sense that it revolves around an international fighting tournament. Even the title took inspiration from other material, namely a 1974 Japanese martial arts movie called The Street Fighter. The arcade cabinet was released in 1987, and originally it wasn't selling very well, but after more buttons were added to the controls, it did become a hit. However, it was with the release of Street Fighter 2 in 1991 where the Street Fighter brand became a pop cultural phenomenon. And I can remember it at the time. Street Fighter 2 was everywhere, on TV, in magazines, and everyone was talking about it.
It was huge! I hadn't even heard of Street Fighter 1, but I sure as heck knew about Street Fighter 2.
Number 9. Capcom used the Mario Bros. Movie as a lesson with how not to make a video game movie. A year before the Street Fighter movie came out, the Super Mario Bros. Movie was released, which made it the first video game-based movie. And as we all know, the movie flopped. And although it's grown in appreciation in time, back in 1993 it was panned by critics and fans of the games. This is because Nintendo sold away any creative control or input into the movie. Instead, it was left up to a movie studio, which is why we're left with a movie that looks less like the world seen in the Mario Bros. Video games and more like Blade Runner. Capcom had learned from this mistake. Although they teamed up with Sony to distribute a Street Fighter movie, they wanted to have complete creative control and call the shots. They even financed the movies themselves by funding the movie a $35 million budget, with Capcom calling all the creative shots.
So, that way, if the movie was a flop, Capcom only had themselves to blame.
Number 8. The script was written in just one night. Wow, my gosh, that's quick. The script for the Street Fighter movie was written by Stephen E. D'Souza, whom had penned the scripts for many successful action movies, including 48 Hours, Commando, The Running Man, and of course, Die Hard. So clearly he knew a thing or two about writing action romps. In fact, D'Souza had already worked for Capcom a year earlier when he created the animated TV series Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, which was also based on a Capcom arcade game. Now, Capcom had already set a Christmas 1994 release date when the movie went into production, and so everything had to be done at a swift pace in order to reach that deadline. But when D'Souza found out at the last minute that Capcom executives were in LA, he wanted to get a script out to them before they left to Japan in order to secure him to get the job. According to D'Souza, he belted out the first draft over one night. And, well, despite the script being written out at a super speed, Capcom must have been impressed as they assigned him as the movie's writer and director. Number 7. Filming location. The start of Street Fighter's filming took place in Bangkok, Thailand, which doubled for Shadaloo City. It wasn't easy to film at that location thanks to bad weather, power shortages, and on one occasion the Thai military shutting down the roads, which made it difficult for the cast and crew to even get to the set. After 3 weeks of filming there, the crew shifted to Australia, with most of the movie being filmed there, with filming taking place in the Australian state of Queensland, namely the Gold Coast, with on-set filming taking place at Village Roadshow Studios. It makes sense as filming in Australia back then would have been very cheap. Despite the general plot of the movie following the Street Fighter 2 game, D'Souza wanted to take the main action off the streets and to give the Street Fighter movie a broader scope and scale, with it feeling more like an action movie as opposed to a martial arts fighting one. He wanted it to feel like a war movie mixed in with action-adventure tropes, taking inspiration from movies like Star Wars and the James Bond films. According to Wikipedia, D'Souza avoided the supernatural elements that were in the game, but was open-minded to introduce these elements into a planned sequel.
So, was that a good idea? Well, I guess it's up to the individual viewer to decide.
Number 6. A huge chunk of the budget went into casting the two main leads. Action movie tough guy, the muscles from Brussels himself, Jean-Claude Van Damme was always the number one choice to play the movie's main lead of Guile. He was in demand at the time thanks to starring in big action movies like Universal Soldier and Hard Target. So he required a high fee, with him being paid $8 million to star in Street Fighter. Yeah, that's already $8 million gone from the $35 million budget. According to some sources, such as 80skids.com, he wasn't easy to work with during the shoot, thanks to substance use and too much partying. The next big actor was Puerto Rican actor Raul Julia, who had previously starred as Gomez Addams in the Addams Family movie. He was cast as the movie's big bad Bison. Raul apparently didn't know much about Street Fighter, but took on the role because his children were fans of Street Fighter. Julia's exact fee is undisclosed, but it's said that with the fees of both Van Damme and Julia, the production took a financial hit, and because of this, no other big names could be cast. Number 5. Other casting, aka let's listen to Minty botch up some names. So more lower-key actors at the time had to fill out the cast of the movie, including Ming-Na Wen as Chun-Li Zhang, Grandel Bush as Gerard Balrog, Andrew Bryanarski as Zangief. He would actually go on to play Leatherface in the rebooted Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies, Damian Chapa as Ken, Wes Studi as Sagat, and Roshan Seth as Dr. Dawson, but I'll always remember him from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. The casting of Ryu proved tricky, as Capcom wanted Japanese actor Kenya Sawada in the part, but director Stephen E. D'Souza had already cast actor Brian Mann in the part. So to compromise, an entirely new character was created, with Captain Sawada. So Kenya Sawada was cast as Captain Sawada, wow, this is a lot of Sawada, and Byron Mann was cast as Ryu. Also, as part of a rule for filming in Australia, the Australian Actors Guild wanted an Australian actor cast in the movie, and the only part left uncast was Cammy. So Australian actress and singer Kylie Minogue was cast in the part.
In fact, I can remember watching the Street Fighter movie for the first time as a little boy and seeing Kylie Minogue and being like, oh wow, Charlene from Neighbours is also in this beast.
Number 4, ill health affected the filming. It is a really sad reality to say this, but by the time Raul Julia signed on to star in Street Fighter, he was in really poor health and was battling cancer. The original idea was to film Julia's scenes first, and while these scenes were being shot, the main cast were being trained for their physical martial arts scenes. However, when Julia turned up on set, director Stephen E. D'Souza was shocked with how weak, frail, and thin the actor looked. So this caused a switch around with filming, where the other cast's fighting scenes would be shot first, while Julia was putting on weight and improving his health. Despite needing plenty of time for training for these scenes, the cast unfortunately didn't get an awful lot of time to train, and on some occasions, they were training mere hours before their scenes were to be filmed. Despite his failing health, everyone appreciated what a professional and a gentleman Julia was to work with, and sadly he died not too long after filming his scenes, and he never got to see the movie's release. Naturally, Street Fighter is dedicated to his memory. Number 3, ratings shenanigans. The original cut of the Street Fighter movie was rated R by the MPAA. This rating was deemed unacceptable by Capcom, as the target audience was mainly kids under the age of 17, so naturally cuts took place, where Street Fighter was once again brought to the MPAA, and its R rating was removed. But this still wasn't a good thing, as now the movie was rated G. Now there was the opposite worry, as it was feared that the general audience and public may see it as being just a kids movie, maybe something along the lines of Power Rangers. So unlike before, now it was time to beef up the rating. So the added inclusion of Van Damme saying shit led to the more desired PG-13 rating. Yep, sometimes you just gotta work a bit extra hard in order to get those PG-13 ratings.
Seriously though, anyone else here really curious to see the R-rated version of Street Fighter?
Number 2, a continuation didn't, but also kind of did happen. The original cut of Street Fighter ended with a post-credit scene where Bison's fist punches out of the rubble, but the scene was cut out of respect of Raul Julia's passing. But it shows that it was intended to make sequels, but a sequel never happened, probably due to the poor reception of the Street Fighter movie. However, the universe in the movie was followed up with an animated series, which ran for 2 seasons from 1995 to 1996. However, the series didn't get favourable reviews, thanks to its storytelling and animation quality. I've honestly never heard of this cartoon till now, so I have no idea. Jump to 2003, and finally 9 years later, a Street Fighter 2 was moving forward, with Jean-Claude Van Damme returning, as well as featuring Dolph Lundgren and Australian pop singer and actress Holly Valance. But the production didn't end up moving forward. Street Fighter would return in live-action format with Street Fighter: The Legend of Chun-Li in 2009, but it was a box office bomb. So much so, here in Australia, it was released straight to DVD. Once again, I didn't even know about this movie till now, but a quick Google search shows that it only has 3% on Rotten Tomatoes. Then in 2014, there was a web series called Street Fighter: Assassin's Fist, which would be edited into a feature movie. And this one did get more favourable reviews. And it would be amiss of me if I didn't mention the same year that the Street Fighter movie came out, there was also an animated movie called Street Fighter 2: The Movie. I originally thought that this was going to be a continuation of the movie, but no, it's more of an animated feature based on the Street Fighter 2 game. and it was actually very financially successful in Japan. Number 1. Unable to escape the video game-based movie curse. Street Fighter the movie was released in December 1994, and financially speaking, it did pretty good. It opened up at the number 3 spot in the box office behind Dumb and Dumber and The Santa Claus, and would go on to make nearly $100 million on its $35 million budget, completely annihilating the Super Mario Bros. Movie box office intake of $38 million. However, despite Capcom's efforts of the Street Fighter movie to not suffer the same fate as the Mario movie, it still couldn't escape getting beaten down by the critics, with New York Times labeling it as, quote, a dreary, overstuffed hodgepodge of poorly edited martial arts sequences and often unintelligible dialogue. It was felt that the movie wasn't engaging and was just lacking, and that not even Jean-Claude Van Damme fans would get satisfaction from it. It was also said that Raul Julia was way too talented for this movie. But despite all the criticism, Raul Julia did win a Saturn Award for his performance, and the movie would continue to be financially successful in the home video market. Although I do think the Street Fighter movie does have its charm and likability, I mean after all it is a part of my childhood, I think it was a bit of a misfire and a little bit misguided. There was just something lacking, like the sandwich was made, but there was just nothing to fill it up with. It just needed that little extra something, that little extra panache, that little extra bang. I can't quite put my finger on it, but it was just lacking that little extra magic that it needed. I also found it kind of weird that the main focus was put on the Guile character, because I've always felt the Ryu character was actually the main frontrunner of the franchise. But hey, I guess it was to capitalize on the casting of Jean-Claude Van Damme. I think the following year, the Mortal Kombat movie got it right in achieving what the Street Fighter movie was trying to do, as if the production learned from Street Fighter, much like how Street Fighter learned from the Mario movie. Over the years, Street Fighter has become a cult movie, with many fans who really appreciate it, and that's cool. And look, it could be that the critics at the time didn't like it because they just didn't understand the Street Fighter brand. They just weren't on the ball with it like the kids were. So the Street Fighter movie does have its loyal fan base, who absolutely adore this movie. And why not? It's a fun, easy to digest movie to put on a Sunday afternoon and to just get lost in its carefree fun.
Yeah, it's not a bad movie. Okay, it's a little bit bad, but that's just part of its fun and 90s charm, and I wouldn't want the movie any other way. But that said, part of me feels like the best Street Fighter movie is still waiting to happen. Anyway, I'm Minty, and I'm off to search for the R-rated version of Street Fighter. See ya! See ya!
I want some lemon squash to have with my lemon pie.